So way, way, way back when I was in college, my roommates and I decided on this rule about asking for forgiveness. If you do something wrong, the rule states that you have to sing the following song to the person you have wronged. And it goes a little something like this. Please forgive me. I know not what I do. Please forgive me. I love you like I do. And it goes on. But, I mean, this is totally ridiculous and silly, but it kind of just eased tensions. And for us, it worked. And yes, we really actually did this. So shout out to my roommates, Monica, Bethany, and Amy. Love you guys.
Now, back in my college days, we weren't as forgiving.
I can see that.
But we definitely had ways of dealing with conflict.
Do tell.
So this was freshman year, early. There was one roommate who had a habit of leaving dirty dishes full of water in the sink. We had told him several times, hey man, this isn't acceptable. You got to take care of this stuff. And you definitely can't leave it in both sides of the sink because then we can't use the sink.
Right. I understand that. Did he sing the Please Forgive Me song to you guys?
We hadn't set up those kind of rules. I mean, that came at those things maybe matured into the sophomore year.
Right. Well, I was very mature, my roommates and I.
So one of the things that we'll talk about in this episode is that you can forgive someone, but there might still be consequences.
Even with the song?
Yes, even with the song. And some of those consequences we just would do differently. In this case, I took it upon myself to enact consequences upon this roommate. I took all of the dishes and the pots and the bowls that had water in them, and I carefully picked them up and moved them onto his bed.
Oh my goodness.
So that we could use the sink.
Wow. That story gets me every time. I just cannot imagine a human doing something like that.
You're welcome.
Oh, this is who I married. Yes.
So, not that I want that done to me, but you would be doing it to your own bed, so.
Yeah, that's no good. I don't want that.
We are Red Weather Christians.
I'm Jen.
I'm Steve.
We're here wading through the muddy waters of what it means to be a Christian in modern society, one episode at a time.
As we've mentioned, today we're talking about forgiveness.
Forgiveness, even if.
What is that song?
Wait, I didn't finish. You don't love me anymore. It's like what's his name? Don Henley or something?
That would fit.
All right, you talk a little bit, Steve. I'll look it up.
We're going to look at how forgiveness manifests itself in our own lives, whether we're asking for forgiveness or being asked to forgive someone. What does the Bible say about it? What should we do about that, even if we don't like what the Bible says about it? And what do we do with the consequences that should still come from those actions?
Right, that's always kind of a murky area because we want to have grace with people and we want to forgive. But then sometimes just naturally there are consequences. Sometimes the consequences are from our actions, which maybe we could work on a little bit. Steve, dirty dishes full of water into the person's bed.
No, that's totally fine.
Whatever you say. And I looked it up and it is Don Henley. The song is called The Heart of the Matter. So when you're finished listening to this episode, you feel free to look up that song and enjoy it.
Or the aforementioned song, Richard Marx song from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Wow, I wouldn't have known that reference. Okay, as we begin this episode, we want you to think of a time in your life when you have been unable or unwilling to forgive someone.
Maybe what they did was so heinous, you couldn't bring yourself to forgive them.
Maybe they passed away before you could forgive them.
Maybe they didn't express any remorse, and you simply didn't want to forgive them.
Well, friends, listen up. In Matthew 6:15, it says, But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins.
Boom! Mic drop.
That verse it seems clear. It seems very harsh. If you don't forgive, you will not be forgiven by God.
Conditional love. Always, right?
Which is also strange to me. God's like, well, humans, I love you
if you obey my commands, if you forgive everybody else, if.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't say if you do not forgive others, God won't love you.
He just won't forgive you.
Which seems like it might go hand in hand. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe not. All right. So let's get right into it. First, what does forgiveness mean? Now, yes, Steve, you made a lot of fun of me because I looked up the definition. I think knowing the dictionary denotation definition is always interesting because, I mean, you don't typically have definitions memorized. So here's what the Oxford Dictionary has to say. Forgive. Stop feeling angry or resentful toward someone for an offense, flaw, or mistake.
Right. I'm not resentful towards you for any of your flaws.
Like talking about the Oxford Dictionary definition.
I totally forgive you for that.
Thanks, babe.
Well, what's weird about this, of course, is it's simply a feeling.
It's interesting because I always thought of forgiving as more of an act than a feeling. So somebody comes up to you and says, oh, I did this horrible thing to you. Please forgive me. Or maybe they even sing. And you say, I forgive you or not. So to read the definition as being just a feeling, that's strange. That was really interesting to me.
Especially considering you could easily say, I forgive you, and still hold all of the resentment toward that same person.
Right. And God calls us to forgive. There are tons of verses in the Bible where God is telling us to forgive others. But what if you don't have the feeling of wanting to forgive that person? What are you supposed to do? Like I was flipping through tabs on my laptop, looking at like various Christian blogs on the idea of forgiveness. And the predominant running theme is obey first, feel later. So you have to forgive people, even if you don't feel it?
But then if you don't feel it, is that really forgiving them?
I feel like that's a straight up lie.
I also feel.
And what if something bad just happened to you and they turn right around, they're like, oh, please forgive me, please forgive me. I mean, how do you just flip the switch in your brain to stop feeling resentment towards that person? I think sometimes things take a little time.
Is that another song that you want to sing?
No, I don't know why I said it like that.
And as far as flipping a switch is concerned, there's this other aspect that is totally not biblical. But when you forgive, you're supposed to forget.
I think people think that's biblical.
It definitely isn't. God says he will forgive and then not remember sin. And we are supposed to kind of forgive like God forgives. So maybe you get that indirect relationship.
Oh, right. Like that's how some people maybe have interpreted it.
But the reality is, if you forget what someone has done wrong to you completely, you are prone to having that person wrong you again in the same way.
I feel like this is a good segue for kind of talking about how forgiveness has played out in my life growing up. And I'm sure I've mentioned it on other episodes, but I grew up with an alcoholic father, and he would say really mean things to me. He would raise his voice at me. And then he would always come, like knock on my door of my bedroom a little later that day and say what seemed to be a genuine apology. And he would just say, like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean what I said, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, it's okay, Dad. But I certainly didn't forget. And when he did it again the next week, it was just, you don't forget. Like, okay, now I know he's going to come apologize an hour later, but then it's going to happen again next week. And as a teenager, I just kind of filed this information away and kind of knew what was coming with my dad. And I lived my life accordingly. And it wasn't bad. He wasn't verbally abusing me, But, well, I don't know. Maybe some people would say that he was. I didn't consider it that bad, but I just tucked it away and I knew like this is how it is right now. And I had a little bit of resentment, and I think that it eroded our relationship a little bit for sure. When I moved out of the house and went to college, my relationship with my dad got way better. And our relationship worked better because we spent time apart, and that's just how it was for us.
Yeah, and as for me, there was a time back in high school, I was trying to play basketball. I still try to do that, by the way. And it was a summer camp it was a summer team camp. And, we got roommates or whatever. We're supposed to be in the dorms at this college. And then we'd play a bunch of basketball. I don't know, 6 to 8 hours of basketball each day. Well, I was somewhat of the uber Christian in high school.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that on a very early episode, how you were quite legalistic in high school.
Well, no, this one I was just sitting in the dorm room reading my Bible, but also no one had chosen to room with me. So I was...
Oh.
Well, that's not the part that I'm getting to. Anyway, what was interesting was that some of my teammates did not care for me and decided to start throwing soap from the hallway into the room at me.
Like the little hotel soaps?
Yeah. And that wasn't cool, but I sat there and I just didn't respond. Figured that would make things worse. I didn't throw anything back. I just went about reading the Bible and sitting there.
Oh my gosh, that is so pitiful and so sad.
I am pitiful in many ways. However, I still had to go play basketball with these guys the next day or 2 days. And then, of course, the next season, which could have made things awkward. And none of them asked for forgiveness. But I ended up probably what you would call forgiving them. I forgave them in the sense that I didn't hold that against them, and I remember it. I don't forget it. And one of the leaders of that soap throwing incident, we became at least mild acquaintances, if not friends. And that's a case where you don't always forgive because someone asks for it.
Oh, right.
Sometimes you forgive so that you can live your life.
Yes, exactly. And it's so healthy for us to be able to forgive in the sense of letting go of that resentment that you have towards somebody.
Yeah. So what we want to look at too is where the Bible preaches forgiveness and where it may have fallen short of forgiveness and yet still followed through with what we're talking about, consequences. There's some pretty hideous things about the time Israel went through the desert and then came into the promised land and slaughtered almost everybody.
Right. And they weren't like, oh, look, hey, some people, let's slaughter them. They were commanded by God to slaughter these people.
And there wasn't really an opportunity. Yes, were these people mostly belligerent and trying to defend their own land? Yeah, I would too, probably, if these people are invading my land. And you wonder, where's the forgiveness if someone were maybe in that town that had nothing to do with it, that didn't want this war to happen at all and would have gladly given up the land if they said, hey, whoa, please forgive.
Oh, gosh.
And they're dead because there was no forgiveness there.
Where's the grace? Where's the love? Where's the forgiveness? Like we mentioned before, forgiveness is all over the Bible. But then you have these instances where God commands Israel to slaughter this huge group of people, and it's confusing.
And therein lies some of this problem where there are still consequences for your actions. I do not agree with what I'm about to say. It's biblical, and yet it still supports this point. There's a story of Achan. He plundered some of the jewels from Jericho, some of the gold from Jericho for himself and his family. That was a no-no. He then lied about it. They found out about it, and then they killed him and his entire family.
Harsh.
Even though he said, oh, yes, it is me. I do have it. I'm sorry. Here it is.
So he took the blame. He admitted what he did. He expressed contrition. Or did he express contrition?
Essentially, he was sorry because he knew he was sorry he was going to get killed.
Right. Yeah. Because you're sorry because you got caught.
Yes, the problem I have with this, which I really don't like, is that Achan is the troublemaker here. He is the thief, he is the liar. And what, his daughter and his son, who have nothing to do with this, they were playing out in the desert, like, stone them all and throw them in the big hole we made.
And taking a step back, I always think about these weird Bible stories and wonder, did that literally happen? Is this just an allegory, an extended metaphor of sorts to make a point of, I guess, don't lie to God? You know, like, did that actually happen where he was killed, his entire family was killed? I don't know.
The other point of that is that there were consequences, and those consequences were followed through. As in, that was the consequence. It was death, and he got it.
Right. Well, I have just a quick anecdote, and I have to keep it vague just for confidentiality. But I had a friend, and we had a falling out. And in my opinion, it was her fault. And she did ask for forgiveness. And I decided that we should not be friends anymore. And I think I probably said, like, I forgive you. I don't know that I felt it. But I did express to her, both in verbal and written form, that it's just not a good idea that we remain friends. And I see that as a consequence.
Yeah, that happens. Sometimes it's not only time that heals or helps forgive, it is distance. Whether you're still in the same town or not, you distance yourself from those people to help the forgiveness process.
Right. And I can say now, according to the Oxford definition of forgive anyway, like, I have forgiven her. I don't feel resentment or bitterness or anger towards her anymore. And I think a lot of that has to do with distance and detachment.
But there is also an issue with forgiveness happening too quickly, and that forgiveness comes with a lot of forgetfulness too quickly. Now, I didn't listen to all of this. You did, Jen. So would you like to take this away?
Oh, okay. So, yeah, what happens when somebody does something wrong today? Let's just say maybe a senior pastor verbally abuses the elders and members of the congregation. Maybe a senior pastor is homophobic and sexist. Perhaps a senior pastor has serious anger issues. How do we navigate forgiveness towards that senior pastor, but also accountability and consequences? Should that pastor, without apologizing or expressing any remorse, simply move towns to become senior pastor at a different church?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, go ahead and listen to the podcast, The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. That is all about Mark Driscoll and how he did all of those awful things, and he didn't ever really clearly express any remorse, and he didn't really ask for forgiveness. I think that in Christian circles especially, we feel this heaviness that we have to forgive people. And even if they don't ask for forgiveness, we are still called as Christians to forgive them. And I think we take that too far sometimes. So for somebody like Mark Driscoll, who did not express remorse, we are supposed to just forgive him. And here he is now, the senior pastor of another big church, probably doing the same exact things, just carrying on.
Maybe changing, maybe. But the problem is there should be consequences.
I mean, some might argue like, well, the consequence was that he had to leave Mars Hill and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, he just went on to do the same thing that he was doing at Mars Hill somewhere else. Seems like he's doing pretty well for himself.
Yeah, and this is just another reminder from the Bible, no surprises here. Proverbs 26:11 says, "As a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool to his folly."
It's so visual. It's so disgusting. And that's what makes it so powerful. Like, oh my gosh, have you ever seen a dog eat its own throw up? I have. It is disgusting.
I mean, it's efficient. They're not wasting
Oh
anything.
my gosh. Okay, it's disgusting.
Yeah. I'll tell you this. I would prefer that they eat it than me cleaning it up.
I mean, I'm not going to argue with that. Honestly, like one of the worst times of my life, I was pregnant with Asher, I'm pretty sure. And our dog, Rocky, while I was in another room or out on a walk or whatever, I don't remember, I had left out an entire stick of butter to soften for something I was going to bake later that day. I got home or I got back into the kitchen or whatever, and I see that the butter is gone, and I see some scraps on the kitchen floor and then like kind of leading around in the house. And I'm like, gosh darn it, that dog ate that entire stick of butter.
Oh, yeah.
And then he threw it up all over the one rug in our entire house. And it was the most disgusting vomit I have ever experienced. I mean, it was butter vomit. The smell was enough to knock someone over. And actually, because he did not eat it, I remember getting the dustpan and trying to kind of sweep it into the dustpan off of the rug. You know, it was chunky. It was disgusting. And I was pregnant and dealing with all of those hormones and everything. And so I would take turns like trying to clean it up and running to the toilet and throwing up myself because I was sick to my stomach taking care of that mess.
And we didn't forget to make sure to put the butter away or never leave it out.
We learned our lesson on that for sure.
Those consequences were mostly ours and not Rocky's.
Well, the other consequence was I could not get the smell out of the rug, no matter what I did. I Googled everything. I used all the products. I probably went and bought some product. Nothing worked. And I already have a very sensitive olfactory system. And then when I'm pregnant on top of that, please. So we had to get rid of the rug.
We did. I will add that as she says, she has a sensitive olfactory sense. That's not entirely true. She puts her olfactory sense, her nose, into wherever she thinks that smell is coming from.
Oh my God.
Whereas I would like, oh, that smells. I don't want that near my nose. Jen will take that something smelly, like, is this what smells? Right into your nose. Yes, this is what smells.
I want to know the source of the smell so that I can take care of it. A quick sniff, and I know or I don't know, and, move on. Then I can either wash that thing or
throw up.
Yeah, I guess. Listen, I was not sticking my nose into the throw up, okay? It was very strong. I wasn't like, oh, what is it?
I think it was more months later you put your nose back to the rug and you're like, it's still there.
Okay, yeah. No, it wasn't months later because it was maybe like a few days later when I thought I'd gotten the smell out and I needed to be sure. Because if the smell was there, even if I couldn't smell it, if I'm like sitting up on the couch, if I know it's there, I can't deal with it. So yes, I might have put my nose close to the area of the rug to just make sure it was gone. And it wasn't, so we had to throw away the rug.
Yep. Now, that veers far from our forgiveness topic today. However, some of the things that people do to us and we're unwilling to forgive or unwilling to forget or unwilling to be able to deal with, like we can't live with that smell, that stench of whatever they did, we have to get rid of it.
Had to get rid of the rug.
And sometimes that means you get rid of that person from your life, or you try to go, you get rid of it some way. You move away from it. And you might not have that feeling of forgiveness until it's out of your life.
Yeah, but the problem with that is, I mean, if let's say the consequence of what you did was throw up on a rug, like I wouldn't get rid of you.
Oh, wait, you're talking to me?
Right. I was like trying to connect it to the analogy and it wasn't really working. But the point is, if you did something wrong to me, I mean, this happens in any relationship. You have issues and disagreements. I'm not going to just roll you up and throw you onto the driveway and have somebody haul you away.
Okay, you're specifically referring to a relationship that we have, like marriage, where you can't really get rid of me.
Yeah.
But
I mean, you can divorce. I get that. But there are so many issues that come up in marriage. If you, like what you were saying earlier, like sometimes you just have to cut that person out of your life. Well, it doesn't work like that with like family or a spouse.
Some people do that with their family.
Well, we're not saying to do that necessarily with your family.
Right. And so what we're getting to at this point is, how do you forgive someone you don't want to forgive, but you're going to see and who's going to be in your life for the long term? We might not have that answer for
I
you.
don't have that answer.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we can talk about our own disagreements, and I think we've mentioned it before, but definitely sleeping on it and then talking about the argument the next day has been something that has helped our relationship. I think that in a relationship with your spouse, it goes two ways, right? So it's not enough, like if you do something wrong to me, it's not 100% my responsibility to just come up to you and be like, Steve, I forgive you. Steve needs to ask for forgiveness or like express contrition. It takes two, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And that just reminds me of when I was reading the book, The Making of Biblical Womanhood by Beth Allison Barr. She references a lot of examples in the church when the men would cheat on their wives and then go confess their sin to the elders or whatever. And then the elders would call the wives in and say, wives, your man has expressed contrition, and the Lord calls you to forgive them. And in that situation, I never would say like you should feel like guilted or shamed into forgiving someone. I do not think that's healthy. If the wife on her own terms comes to the point where she is able to forgive her husband, I mean, great for them. But I don't think it should be some elder from the church sitting you down telling you, God calls you to forgive, so you better be doing it, lady.
So let's take a quick story from parenthood on forgiveness. Our boys have done varying things that are wrong or bad or accidents even.
Yeah. And as have we as parents. I'll just throw that out there. We need to ask forgiveness from them on occasion.
But sometimes what happens is when they finally get in trouble, and they know they are in trouble, they'll be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I love you. Sorry. It's like, no, you're still in your timeout. You still have lost privileges for tonight. Those are consequences of your actions. Sorry, can I get out of my timeout?
Yeah, and we forgive them, of course. We do. But then there are still consequences.
And we try not to forget, we try not to let them forget that they made that mistake once before and how to not make that mistake again.
You know, we're just humans trying to live our best lives over here, doing our best.
Yeah. And if you think someone has wronged you and you've been fooled by them, just think about what Michael Scott would say. He would say, fool me once, strike one. But fool me twice, strike three.
We are Red Weather Christians.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Jen.
Keep the conversation going.